The old woman was the first to speak to the dead, and for this they wanted to cast her out. Her name was Zaya, and her grief was a rogue wave that had shattered the shoreline of her mind, or so they believed. Her son Ren, a man whose laughter was as bright as the sun on the water, had been taken by the sea. A sudden squall, a capsized hide boat, and he was gone. There was no body to return to the earth, no finality, only a gaping emptiness where a life used to be. For her clan, the people of the glistening shell, this was a brutal but simple truth. The sea gives, and the sea takes. The living must turn their faces back to the living, for sentiment is a luxury the world does not afford. But Zaya refused. In the hollow of the dune where Ren had slept, she began her strange work. She would sit for hours by his empty sleeping fur, her lips moving in a silent, one-sided conversation. She gathered things. Not useful things, like firewood or edible kelp, but objects that held a specific, almost invisible meaning. The iridescent wing of a cormorant, the spiraled architecture of a nautilus shell, a smooth gray stone shaped like a human heart. She would arrange them carefully on his fur, a mosaic of memory. She invites his ghost to linger, the other elders would whisper, their faces etched with concern. It is not natural. The gone are gone. They must be allowed to forget us, as we must forget them. The clan's lead hunter, Kyle, was a man carved from pragmatism. His mind was a sharp flint tool, honed for one purpose: survival. He saw Zaya's ritual not as grief, but as a dangerous infection of unreality. He found her one morning painting a piece of driftwood with red ochre, her hands and face smeared with the sacred clay. "Zaya," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. He had respected her once. She had taught him which tides exposed the richest mussel beds. "The children's water skins need mending. Nia struggles alone to scrape the hides. We have a sick one who needs willow bark tea. Your hands are needed for the living." Zaya looked up, her eyes, usually so sharp and aware, seeming to look through him. She held up the ochre-stained wood. "This is his strength," she said, her voice raspy. "The color of his lifeblood. When I hold it, I remember he was not afraid." Cale recoiled as if she had offered him a snake. "You remember with your mind, not with sticks and clay. This is a game for children and a dangerous one. You are teaching them to see what is not there. We need their eyes on the horizon, watching for storms, not on the ground, searching for ghost stones." He kicked at one of the carefully placed shells, sending it skittering across the sand. "The sea took him. Take your grief to the sea and leave it there. The clan cannot afford to carry it." Zaya said nothing, but a single tear cut a clean path through the ochre on her cheek. She bent down and tenderly retrieved the shell, cradling it in her palm as if it were a living thing. The division grew. The elders saw senility. The other hunters saw a bad omen, a perversion of the natural order. The children, however, were drawn to the mystery. They watched Zaya's shrine of memories with a mixture of fear and fascination. Among them, Nia, Zaya's grandniece, felt the pull most strongly. She was a young woman on the cusp of adulthood, her hands skilled with the awl and scraper, her mind taught to be as practical as Cale's. Yet, when she saw the desolation in the faces of those who had lost someone, and then saw the strange, sad peace Zaya seemed to find in her rituals, she felt a profound uncertainty. The clan's way was efficient, but it was empty. It offered no balm for the wound of loss. One evening, Nia dared to approach Zaya as she sat before her collection of memories. "Why do you do this?" she asked softly. "They say you are calling his spirit back from the endless water, that it will bring the ocean's anger." Zaya picked up the sea eagle feather, its white tip brilliant in the fading light. "His spirit is not in the feather, little one," she explained, her voice finding some of its old clarity. "His spirit is gone, but his sight. He saw things no one else could. A ripple on the water that meant a school of fish. A cloud on the horizon that meant a change in the wind. When I hold this feather, I do not speak to his ghost. I ask his sight to be with me. I ask my own heart not to forget the shape of his courage. She looked at Nia, her gaze intense. They think I am speaking to the dead. I am not. I am learning how to keep the dead with us, inside, so we are not left with nothing. It was a staggering concept. A thought so new, it felt like it could crack the world open. To hold a thing not for what it is, but for what it means. Nia looked from the feather to her own hands, suddenly aware that her world of practical objects was only the surface of a much deeper ocean. The ocean's anger came, though not in the way they feared. It began with a stain on the water, a murky, rust-colored tide that crept into their pristine cove. The red water. Within a day, the shellfish, their unwavering staple, the food that saw them through every lean season, were poison. Mussels, clams, oysters, all of them became vessels of sickness, causing violent illness in anyone who ate them. The bedrock of their survival crumbled overnight. Panic, cold and sharp, gripped the clan. Kale organized hunting parties to push deeper into the scrubland behind the coast, but the game was scarce and wary. They were people of the sea, and the land was a foreign, stingy host. Children began to cry with a hunger that could not be sated. The sick man who needed willow bark grew weaker. The red water lingered, a visible manifestation of the world's displeasure, and all eyes turned to Zaya. Her lonely, quiet ritual was no longer a sad eccentricity. It was a malignancy. Kyle, his face grim with the weight of his starving people, saw the connection as clear as day. She meddles with the spirits of the water, he declared one night around the dwindling fire, his voice ringing with conviction. She tries to hold back what the sea has claimed, so the sea has soured its gifts in return. Her grief has poisoned our home. This time, there was no debate. Fear and hunger were powerful persuaders. The logic was simple, brutal, and absolute. The source of the curse had to be purged. The decision was made with the grim consensus of a pack of wolves cornering a wounded member. Zaya was to be exiled. When Nia heard the decree, a cold dread washed over her. She ran to Kyle, who was sharpening a spearhead with furious, jerky movements. "You cannot do this," she pleaded. "The red water is a thing of the seasons. It has happened before in my grandfather's time. It has nothing to do with her." "In your grandfather's time, we did not have a madwoman building ghost nests on the shore." Kale snarled, not looking at her. "She has offended the balance. The world is speaking to us, Nia, and we are listening. She must go. It is her life, or all of ours." "What she does is not madness," Nia cried, tears streaming down her face. It's for us. So we don't become empty. So we remember." Kale finally stopped and looked at her, his eyes filled with a pained frustration. Remembering does not fill a child's belly. Remembering does not cure the sick. It is a weight. We are survivors, Nia, not storytellers. We live, we die, and the tides wash the beach clean. That is the only truth. Now go. The decision is made. Nia felt her world cleave in two. On one side was Kale, her clan, her whole life. A world of hard, clean-edged certainty and the brutal, shared struggle for survival. On the other was Zaya, an exile with a handful of shells and a new, fragile, and possibly insane idea about the human heart. To stay was to live. To go was to embrace a mystery that could lead to starvation and death. But to stay, she realized with a sickening lurch, felt like a death of a different kind. The morning of the exile was gray and cold. The red water had receded slightly, but it left a foul, decaying stench that hung in the air. Zaya stood alone, a small figure against the vastness of the ocean. They had given her a single water skin and a pouch with a few strips of dried fish, a gesture of mercy that felt more like a final insult. She clutched a small leather bag to her chest, her ghosts, her memories. Her face was a mask of calm resolve. As she looked upon the faces of the people she had known her entire life, she felt no anger, only a vast, aching pity for them. Kale gave the final nod. Go, and do not look back." Zaya turned and began to walk north, toward the barren headlands. The clan watched in silence, their relief warring with a deep, unspoken shame. But then, a figure broke from the group. It was Naya. She held her own small pack and her sharpest flint knife. She walked past Kyle without a word, her jaw set, her eyes fixed on the retreating back of the old woman. Kyle grabbed her arm. His voice was a strangled whisper. "Nia, no. Don't throw your life away for these fantasies." Nia stopped and turned to face him. Her expression was no longer that of a pleading girl, but of a woman who had made an irrevocable choice. The words that came from her were not her own, but they were the truest things she had ever said. "She is not mad," Nia stated, her voice clear and strong in the morning air. "She is teaching us how not to forget. I would rather be lost in the wild with a full heart than be safe and empty with you." She pulled her arm free and ran to catch up with Zaya, falling into step beside her. The two women, the old and the young, walked on together, two small specks of life against the immense, indifferent landscape. Kyle watched them go, a storm of rage, confusion, and sorrow churning within him. He had done what was necessary. He had made the logical choice. He had protected the clan from a dangerous idea. So why did his victory feel so much like a wound? He turned to rally the others to get them back to the grim business of survival. As he did, his foot nudged a small, smooth, white stone on the ground. It was perfectly round, with a single black line running through its center. He stopped, his breath catching in his throat. His daughter, who had been taken by a fever the winter before, had loved stones like this. She would spend hours collecting them, arranging them, her small hands busy with a private, joyful logic. This stone could have been hers. His mind screamed at him. "It's a rock! It means nothing!" But his body betrayed him. Before he had even registered the decision, his hand, the same hand that had just condemned Zaya, darted down. His fingers closed around the small, cool stone. He straightened up, his fist clenched tight, his heart hammering in his chest. He glanced around, terrified someone might have seen his moment of weakness, his act of insane sentimentality. No one had. They were already dispersing, their faces grim, their minds on the hunt. The logic of his world was absolute. Objects were objects. The dead were gone. Memory was a ghost that could not feed you. He knew all this. And yet, the stone was warm in his hand. Slowly, furtively, he slipped his hand into the small pouch at his waist and released the stone. It settled among his spare flint blades and fire-starting kit, a secret, silent passenger. Zaya's madness had not been cast out. It had just been given a new, secret name. It was an unstoppable seed, planted now in the heart of the man who had tried to destroy it. A seed that would grow in the dark and, in time, change the meaning of everything.